Welcome to VADA Live. I'm your host, Dan Carrigan, back for another segment with an amazing guest to talk about, of all things, sales processes. I'm joined by Andy Seidenman, who is an instructor at NADA Academy. Andy, your experience in the automotive industry, I believe 30 plus years working with major brands. We're really excited to bring you on to talk about an issue that's really important to dealers throughout the state of Virginia and beyond. Andy, welcome to VADA Live.
Well, thank you very much, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Andy, what are some of the things from a sales process perspective dealers should be focusing on, and maybe within the context of that ever-changing environment we see nowadays?
Well, that's a great question. Number one, I think you wrapped it up at the end of that, is with the ever-changing landscape. Processes, I believe, need to be very fluid, structured-wise, but they also need to be identified and looked at forensically from time to time to make sure that the process is still meeting the objective, if you will. That being said, that the process also has to maintain a certain structure. Otherwise, we run into, and we all see it, things like process evaporation. We come back from a big event, a meeting, even in some of our training, and without the proper structure in place to support the process, we wind up having that process evaporation. We see it sometimes, and it might manifest itself, for instance, in a way like, the GM just went to a training, he's got this new great idea, and he comes back in, give it a month, we'll forget all about it. Or from the other side of it, for the management side, we start talking about, didn't we used to do that? When did we stop doing that? And that's exactly what process evaporation is, and simply how it happens is with the lack of structure that supports that process.
Is there anything dealers can do to prevent that? I know it's an open-ended question, but what really do you think is the driver in that process evaporation? I really love that term.
Yeah, no, it's a great question too. I think that the biggest driver is, everybody there's lots of different charts and things like that, but
sure.
But there's a couple of components when you making any type of change, and installing a process is nothing short of making a change. So number one has to be, there has to be an awareness from everybody. There has to be a desire. There has to be an ability, or they have to be able to physically do the task to make the change. And there has to be reinforcement. And the reinforcement is what comes from the management, and understanding that the basic principles, like most of us know it takes 30 solid days to sort of get into a habit of doing something, especially when you're making a change. So without all of those different areas, the awareness, the desire, the ability, the reinforcement, there's bound to be something that comes off the hinges, if you are off the rail there.
We love examples here at VADA Live. Are there any that come to mind that maybe a situation that could have worked out better, was a great idea that didn't quite make it to the process finish line?
Yeah, wow, lots. One that comes to mind quite in the new way that we do in business is video implementation. We all realize that, social media and the power of video is so extreme, but a lot of us are scared. We get a little nervous about putting that camera in front of our face. It's funny we're doing this, but just open a camera and people sometimes get a little bit nervous. So I think we've seen that more than anything, and we try, at NADA as well, is to try to really to make that an exercise, to make it fun, to show people that it's not hard to put a camera. Just make it goofy, be yourself, be authentic, and be natural. But that takes a little bit of push, right? We have to install processes. If that's the behavior we want to create, we have to have a process in there to do that. So we have stores that leave our class, for instance, like we love the video aspect, and they go right back and they reward for behavior, right? So they don't put a whipping boy out there, a whipping post, say you must do this, or they're like, hey, we want to incentivize you. We think that video implementation is a really strong thing. We're going to incentivize you for doing that. So the difference is we see the ones that are incentivizing the behavior really, really strong at, as you said, carrying that across the finish line. And they report back like, oh, everybody loves it. And we see it. We have the ability to see it on our social media channels. We follow our students along the way as well. The other side of that is when it's not made fun, when it's just like a struggle, we see it lifts for a couple of minutes, a couple of weeks perhaps, and then it dives off and down to the negative again.
Is there any recipe for success from your end in thinking, okay, talking change process, we may have had a successful Q1, couple months at something. What do you think the difference is for lasting impact to make sure it really sticks as far as a change?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it seems like everything changes almost on a weekly basis in our industry. Yeah. Right? I've seen that for 30 years plus. It's always something, the newest, the best, the neatest thing. It's funny though. It's always designed to align with the consumer, right? That's one of the things that we've missed. Or we have the data to align with the consumer, but we sometimes fall short of it. Like we don't match it. So I think best practices that continue to growth is just the continuing of again the behavior modification, if you will.
Perfect segue into CRM. We might as well go there right now, Andy. And that digital tools. I mean, what's your advice for CRM? Digital elements. You have, we'll say that interpersonal element of that. Where's that fitting in for dealers? Where should it really?
Yeah, I think again, I'm going to go back to the video comment. I think we really see a difference in installing video content in the CRM. Our CRM is there. It's a customer relationship management tool. It's designed to manage the relationship, if you will. It has technical data, car information, vehicle or consumer information. But more than anything, I think that CRM is designed to build a story. Like I want to be able to see and put, who are the kids? How old are they? When are they going to be in the market? What did they tell me about? What's the birthdays? All these different relationship building events in the CRM. And I think far too often that we don't put enough emphasis on the fact that CRM is really a relationship building tool. It's designed as a follow-up mechanism. The follow-up mechanism we know now is video rich, needs to be video rich in order to establish engagements. And the challenge I always do is I ask our students sometimes, read this paragraph, right? And they read it or it's up on the screen. And I said, now think about what impact that might make the same words, but in a video form where you can see a dynamic, you can see a hand motion, gestures and smiles and all that. Would it make a bit? And it's unquestionably yes. So what I'm seeing now, the best uses of CRM, and let me back up a second.
Sure.
The CRM tool itself is one of the least optimized tools that we have. We use about maybe 20% industry-wise as what it's capable of doing. I work for a CRM company. I know the insides of it. If you can think about it, it can do it. It can be programmed to do exactly what you want it to do. It's just a piece of software. So relating that to how do I use that going forward? I would convert everything to video. I would convert almost every single outbound piece of dialogue or conversation or communication, and I'd see about implementing or transitioning that into a video format rather than a text or email format.
And next question, Andy, we might as well stay with the acronyms at this point. BDC, your thoughts on just building and managing, high-performing BDC. Let's just get right into it.
Yeah, that's so funny. I remember it was 2005, and I had just come back from the West Coast. And the CEO of the company, the group I was working for, came to me. I was on the desk, and he said, "You know anything about this thing called a BDC?" And I said to him, I said, other than the initials, I don't know what it is. And he said, it's some kind of business development center. Can you go find out? So he sent me to Digital Dealer. He sent me to NADA to the show that year. And I came back with a wow factor, like, whoa, what is this thing? And about 7 months later, I built my first BDC at that group that was 4 franchises. I had 30 agents in that play. I hired them all. And we were essentially the triage center for all of our franchises. But now let me just go, that was 20 years ago. That was 2005, which is kind of interesting now. But I started to think, is it really a business development center? Like those words, what do they mean? And then I've also had, depending on your manufacturer, some call it things like CXEs, Customer Experience Center, or things like that. As it's evolved over 20 years, the digits or the initials BDC sort of got lost in the sauce, if you will. And that also caused staffing problems too. We initially thought it would be a great idea to the underperforming salespeople, put them into that and let them go there. But it's a completely different skill set. So it took probably 15 years, and it's still not perfect, for operators to realize that we can't stick salespeople necessarily in a BDC and have it function as a BDC or a CXE, especially with the customer experience center. If we think about, our salespeople are wired to sell, right? They're not necessarily on that same wiring path naturally and organically as you might when you have a great customer service call. You call your bank, whatever, you know what I'm talking about. You get off that call and like, wow, that was a really, really good call. They answered your questions and everything. But what happens when we put a salesperson into that position? That's not what happens. So we've altered and we've modified over the time who is supposed to be staffed in that department. Is it a salesperson or is it a really, really good customer service person? And that's the secret sauce right there. And we've played with modifications and morphing that department. Maybe half it's staffed with salespeople, half staffed with agents. Maybe we have an umbilical cord. And that's sort of what I found at this point to be the best way to source that department is to hire customer service experts, people that genuinely care about how people react to their voice and about their content and what they're doing. The salesperson has a whole different role, but there has to be an umbilical cord, if you will, between the CXE or this BDC agent and that salesperson. The CXE agent goes to the desk one time and gets yelled at, they're done, right? So they have to be a separate. The salesmen, they thrive on it, right? They go through, some of them even yell back at their managers if they have that kind of relationship, but we can't mix them. So I think the separation of the two is a really, really critical role.
Appreciate that insight, Andy. And maybe before switching gears a bit to talk about NADA Academy, just a question for you to bring this discussion home regarding process. Almost, I'm thinking of this as a journey, and say I have this idea, something of process-wise I know is going to be great and implement. Where can dealers start? And at a high level, what does that journey look like from idea to perhaps communicating to implementation to staying with it for lasting impact?
Yeah, so that's great. We have, I'm going to bring it back into the academy and what we see through our classmates. We see, a very small percentage of operators in the industry come through our class. We call it the Hogwarts, obviously, for a lot of good reasons. Yeah, and not only do our students get a lot of great ideas, but we instructors, we get a lot of great ideas too. Even our director, Michael, he's forgotten most of, more than what we know. He almost every week, like, wow, that was a great idea. And so what we encourage our students to do, number one, we call it the power of the room. We have students from all over the United States and all over the country, really, that are sitting in a room going through a 6-week academy or even less. Sometimes if it's our online courses, but they bond. And sometimes they have these ideas that have worked, they've implemented in the store in Wichita, Kansas. And a dealer from New England, like, wow, I never thought about that. And so what we really do is we encourage that incubator type of a conversation through our in-class, in-person learning, as well as some of our software and discussion boards that we encourage them to participate in long after class is over, as well as homecoming sessions that we prepare. We're doing one this afternoon, as a matter of fact, with a class that graduated 4 or 5 months ago. But we all get back together. What's new? What's happening? And we develop most of our instructors develop strong bonds with our students. And the only thing, as a steward of the industry, as sort of I feel is a prerequisite for being in the position that I am, it's important to me to figure out and to see whether my teaching and what we're instructing these people, our students, to do is impactful and is it making a difference in their operation? That's number one. Is it creating lift? Is it creating better culture? Is it creating a better industry? And that's also a big key high-level topic. Our industry is still at the bottom as far as how public perception is. And the reality is we do a tremendous amount of work, good work, for our communities that we serve. And so we have to continue to do the work of promoting the industry in the proper light.
And as far as the academy itself, for someone who may not be familiar, what is that really geared towards? I know it's an all-encompassing program. There are various areas. What's the overview of that for someone who may not be familiar?
Oh, yeah. No, thank you. So the academy, I will tell you my personal experience because it's very relatable. I spent better part of 25 solid years every day in a dealership, desking deals, operating, and things like that. And I, along with many, many other operators, we have an ego. And I thought there was not very much that I didn't know about the industry after that many years. But I got to tell you, from the first week that I stepped through the academy doors, I was humbled. They told me it was about a year-long process to onboard as an instructor. I was like, a year? And I was like, now after a year I've been doing, I understand. Because I got to be honest, there were so many things, operational things, mathematical things, that I didn't know, right? I had no clue. And when I saw them, I'm like, oh my Lord, if I would have known this before, the advantage now that I see, it's unbelievable, because now we see operators that are coming through the academy from A to Z, which is exciting because we have operators that come through that are like me, some more years of experience than me, and some that have been in it a year, right? They're brand new. And the measurement that I see is that the light bulbs that go off in all of them, whether it's the 30-year student or the 1 year, the same light bulbs go off because they're learning things that are just not necessarily taught within the four walls of our dealership. It's when we get out of those walls and we experience the input from other people, other parts of the industry, from vendors to other operators in class to instructors. It's just a different perspective. And, the math never lies. So that's a big, big thing that we see. And honestly, going through the academy, those students are in rare air. If you think about the number of industry professionals at the level that could attend the academy, but for whatever reason don't, it's like 3%. It's such a small amount, that have had the opportunity to come through the academy, graduate from the academy. And fortunately, we do see the lift almost every single time in every operation once that is implemented. Once the teaching, the learning that they learn going through the academy, when they implement that, it's all about the execution, right? That's the other thing. Once it's executed, it's phenomenal.
Why do you think within the industry and dealers, is it so important to commit to continuing education and growth? How valuable is that?
It's in that. I mean, you can't really put a value on it, I don't believe. I think this industry, like more than others, I think changes very, very quickly. Adopts things, but it doesn't change, I guess. We like things like the shiny object, right? But there's, when you look at early adopters and the mainstream and then the followers, we as an industry separate that so much. We wait so long. We watch so that was that going to work? Is that kind of going to work? I think AI has been the fastest adopting thing that I've ever seen in this industry. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I feel like, the change that happens, it is so rapid and you have to embrace it. I mean, it's such a cliche, hindsight, there's a dozen of them. Hindsight's 2020, nothing changes, nothing changes. I'm a big proponent of change myself. But I believe if we embrace the change, we continue to embrace the change and run with it, understand that we have to, we'll die. We're already seeing a reduction in dealerships across the United States, right? The physical dealerships, their dealer principals are getting out, right? Because they have not changed, right? It's a different industry. The internet made all that. There are different ways to look at things. There are different ways to analyze our operations. One of the things we talk about is, do we really need, I'm going to say this, I'm going to get a lot of feedback from this. Do we need this thing called a pack anymore? Do we? Probably not. We did in the past, but we have detailed analytics that what we use those things for in the past to cover mistakes, it's not relative anymore. It's hurting us, not helping us. It's it's hindering our abilities to do certain things with a fine lens. Like we have an operation that's millions of dollars, but we have some gray area. Why? That's because we've always done it that way. The most dangerous phrase in the English language is that we've always done it that way. We have to change, we have to evolve in order to survive.
Hearing that, Andy, it's a mindset, and in many ways, getting involved with and perhaps NADA Academy is one of these ways of growth and really thinking about just operations, process, and change is a priority. Pursuing something like NADA Academy is maybe to some degree really the hard charging end of that, if you will, that end of, okay, we are minded in that area, but as far as getting an industry together to talk about these things and learn and grow, it would appear that offering is a place to, or that academy is a place to do so.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. The Academy it's a concentrated place that encompasses all areas of dealership operations, from financial understanding, through the parts and through service and fixed operations, through the two different levels of the variable operations and departments, the area that I teach, which is vehicle management, and then the second part, which is really more cultural, like how do we change the operations of our industry? How do we conduct better meetings, more effective meetings? How do we utilize and leverage technology to our benefit, not just our benefit, to the consumer's benefit, right? We know all these data. We've had all of these data points for years and years and years and years and years, but we sometimes have failed to execute in some of these known areas of contention. And now, as time goes on, we have more and different products and programs that will allow us to be more efficient, to create a better ecosystem within our dealership. Again, not just for our employees and staff, but for everyone. Our employees are our culture, our employees are our currency, if you will, but it has to transcend and give that back to the consumer as well. So, and I think NADA does a really good job of setting that stage into the perspective of our future operators, what they want. The younger students that we see coming in, and even the older ones, which is such a wonderful thing to see, they're embracing a different type of an industry, not an industry that cares more about people than it does about cars.
Mm. You had mentioned being a steward of the industry, and you gave some insight in that. Can you talk to me a little more about that?
Yeah. Thank you for catching on that word. Yeah, a stewardship. Stewardship is a word that I've used in the past in different environments, but there's never been a time where I felt like I was had a responsibility to be a steward of this industry and to push forward and to carry forward that education and knowledge. And I think it comes from a lot of different places. You pick up things along the way. And I think the first thing when I was 8, my grandfather told me that education was something that once acquired, nobody could ever take it away from you. That conversation was spawned by him telling me he was, 60 something. He was going to Europe to go to college with my grandma. And I was like, "You're a little old to go to college, aren't you?" And that was his response. But it also had some industry impact as well. I remember years ago asking a sales manager a question, and the sales manager's response to me was, "I'm not telling you, blah, 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 fill in the blank. It took me a long time and a lot of money to acquire this knowledge. I'm not sharing it freely." And I was like, wow. I think that was the only conversation I ever had with that person. And so that also was an impact. Like, why did he say that? Like, why would I keep anything inside? Like, so to me, it's always been about the sharing. Like, when I learn something, I want to share it with somebody else that could possibly benefit from that. Maybe it's as a father, my kids, the same thing, but I just feel it's necessary. I'm not going to live forever, and the industry changes. I remember, I look back and I'm like, wow, that car is a 94, 90. I remember the model based, like, I want to be able to share that with somebody. I want to teach somebody what it was like back then and how good or bad it is now versus then. Mostly good, but those are some things that I carry pretty strongly, pretty close to my heart, I guess.
How does that shape your leadership style? We like to ask this often on this podcast since we get leaders on to speak about that. Or is there any advice, and maybe within the context of developing processes within a dealership? What's your leadership style over 30 years? What have you learned? What has been successful for you to date?
So yeah, I think one of the biggest things, I don't take myself too seriously most of the time. Like I do have a serious side, when it comes to, operations at a store, but I also realize like nothing, if it's not going to kill me, I'm going to learn from it. Right. So there's been many, many times over my career where I had some ideas, some great, some really harebrained, because I do get some harebrained ideas sometimes. I'll give you an example. I had this harebrained idea at a store that I was going to do Hawaiian days. And so for an entire month, I can't remember how many tons of sand I had dumped in the middle of the parking lot. And I set up misters and tents, and our uniforms of the day were beach attire. And we weren't at our desks. We were out in the beach in the middle of the flipping parking lot. And I had no idea if it was going to work or not. And it worked. It was a small town. We gave away 3 trips to Hawaii that month. We had more traffic than I'd ever seen, even when I worked in LA. It was amazing. So I don't know. I just always like to have fun, think outside the box, try things, swing the bat, nothing bad is, as long as it's nothing really catastrophic could potentially happen. Go for it. Go for it.
For those that have that idea and have always been scared to go for it, any words of advice?
Yeah, do it. Just do it. If it, like I said, if it doesn't kill you, you're going to learn from it. You're going to learn something good and you'll repeat it, or you're going to learn something bad. And you're like, whoa, that was great. And you know what? It'll become a story. I'll tell you another story. Same store, Same exact environment. There was a highway right in back of the store, right? It was the 101 freeway that runs from California all the way up north to Oregon. A lot of traffic, small store. And it was the back of the dealership, right? So I had this idea that I was going to get this ginormous balloon, right? Because we all know balloons sell cars, right? Just tied to the windshield. Anyway, so I want this balloon. This thing was probably 7 feet in diameter. Took a tank of helium and a rope about that thick to hold it. Now, I'm just kidding. It was a lot, not that thick. And it was about 1,000 feet in the air. But the part of the story that I forgot to tell you is directly across the street from the dealership is a small little airport. Well, it took about 15 minutes to get a call from the airport saying, you better take that balloon down because pilots are almost hitting it. So the pattern altitude was 1,400 feet. So they had 400 feet about. So yeah, so that was one of those experiences. Like, it was a great idea. Everybody loved it. We were out back looking at this thing, launched it into the sky, but it wasn't a good idea. So they didn't do it again. But I still tell that story. It's been 20 years since I did that. It's just impactful.
As maybe one final question, Andy, just going back to the process element where we began, is there one takeaway you want dealers to have as it relates to either the idea, implementation, or again, the longevity of a process and then putting that together in a dealership?
Yeah, I would say that find a process, write it out, make it visual, and identify at each step during that process what about that step could be made better, like a flow chart, if you will. I did this for many of my stores, from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. What happens, the customer journey, and not necessarily when they walk in the store, by the way. We have to start the journey, the sales process. There's no sales process, right? The sales process is developed now by the consumer, not by us. It used to be us. They walked in the door. We went here, 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 here. That doesn't happen anymore. Rarely does it happen. So the sales process needs to be mapped out, identified, starting almost from the intent of the consumer. What does the consumer do when they think about a new car? Where do they go? What do they do? And then what at each process, at each step, can we do to eliminate friction? If we look at that as a starting point, eliminate any potential frustrations, any potential friction. We want to make it effortless, right? Think of the Amazon-ish, and that's a big topic in automotive. Why do we go to, because it's easy, it's click, it's one thing. There's not all these different things to confuse us. Do I want it, or do I want to save it and think about it later? It's that simple. So, processes to make sure a process stays intact, write it, revisit it daily. and constantly refine it.
And I'm hearing you on revisit it daily, which is probably something that's easier said than done for most. Andy, really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us on VADA Live. For all those tuning in, we were hearing from Andy Seidenman, who's an instructor at NADA Academy. If you want to learn more about NADA Academy, simply visit the link on your screen. My name is Dan Carrigan, and again, this is VADA Live. See everybody next time.